Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today I have with me Heath Mello, who is a former state senator and higher education executive. He assumed the role of president and CEO of the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce in August 2023. In this capacity, he oversees day-to-day operations, emphasizing economic development, public policy, and workforce partnerships across an 8-county region. Additionally, Mello serves on the Nebraska Highway Commission and various committees, leveraging his extensive legislative experience. Previously, he held leadership roles at the University of Nebraska System and Metropolitan Community College. Mello, a native of Omaha, holds a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Heath, great to see you again.
Great to see you again as well, Andrea. Glad to be with you.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I have a bunch of questions for you because you're in public service. You always have been. And one of my first thoughts or questions for you is just, how did you choose that career path? Like what was it inside of you, or what forces outside of you kind of guided you in that direction?
Well, terrific question. I think there is always a unique answer. I always love hearing stories about when I was a really young child. Elementary school. My elementary school principal would say, I said I wanted to be the president of the United States back when I was in 6th grade. At that point in time, they knew I wanted to go into public service, which was always kind of a joke. But when I was in undergrad at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, I really thought two things. One, I thought I wanted to go into law, and then I made a transition into education. And at that point in time, I transitioned into what I thought I was going to be a high school social studies government teacher. And for a period of time, I transitioned away from pre-law into that experience. And while I was in that course of study, I really came to appreciate education more and appreciated what educators were, what they went through, as I did a student teaching experience at a Lincoln high school. And while I chose to transition away from that, it kind of reaffirmed my views of public service, both in terms of what educators do from an education perspective, but also wanting to go into public service in another way. And so that, in my experience in my undergraduate education, kind of drew me back into public service in some form or another. And I knew at some point in my life I was going to go into public service. I just didn't know when. And so luckily, I was able at that point in time to kind of find my way in and around government and in politics. Serving as I was able to have some great internship experiences as an undergraduate at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, particularly one where I was able to do an internship at the Department of Economic Development for a year, which was fabulous and really kind of helped me get kind of my initial foray into economic development experience. But ultimately, fast forward a few years later, I was drawn into and recruited to run for the Nebraska legislature at the age of 28. And that really, at that age, pulled me into that experience after being an aide to U.S. Senator Ben Nelson, kind of brought me into kind of, hey, maybe I can serve the public as an elected official after serving as an aide to an elected official. And really at that point in time, that's kind of pulled me into that elected official experience. And as they say, that's all she wrote. It kind of pulled me into a path in a career that took me into a variety of different opportunities, both in the higher education public service realm, as well as into the elected official experience.
So it sounds like you had some natural gifts or talents in that area, but then also you must have cared about it. What piqued your interest in teaching history and, just caring about this level of society. I guess people choose different paths for different reasons. And I'm just kind of wondering why that interest in particular.
I think, Andrea, perhaps if I was to look back of what drew me to probably public service at kind of that younger collegiate level experience first, I think it was really more of the focus around civic engagement and bringing people into the process of engaging with their government more so than public policy issues. And that's perhaps where I kind of feel my strength has always lied in terms of what, where I've been able to be more effective and where I've been able arguably to have a greater impact is my interpersonal ability and interpersonal skills to bring people together and to find ways to build consensus with sometimes individuals who have a difficult time finding agreement around thorny issues, purely around the philosophical views and perspectives I have of making sure people have a seat at the table and facilitating difficult conversations, with the belief that, hey, if we are able to get people in a room talking about how government should work or how we can try to solve a problem, realizing that government really is just what we collectively as people want to do together. That at the end of the day is what public service is and what government really is at the end of the day. And serving the public in that whatever role that is, whether it's an appointed position, whether it's a volunteer position, whether it's an elected position. That's really kind of what drew me into all of this. It was never really about an issue or a policy that kind of said, I have to go do X, Y, and Z. It really was more of getting people engaged, feeling that to some extent, if I could get people more engaged, there was ability to do more things and see how we could solve problems, realizing there was always a problem to be worked on. And I translate that throughout a majority of my time in public life. It feels like that is always been a North Star for me, is always looking for ways to engage individuals, to bring more people to the table, and really always seeking to be that problem solver, to find a way to help be that bridge to really help restore civility, or really to help be that consensus builder around what we know are sometimes difficult issues that are in the public square.
Wow. It sounds like you have a lot of positivity around that topic, like that you will actually believe it can happen.
Well, I do have a vial of idealism I keep in my bedside. I always joke, and occasionally there's a small vial left in terms of how difficult it feels like our public square, that it can be sometimes in light of the coarseness that has surrounded public life in politics over the last decade, it may feel. And I still have that sense of idealism left that you sometimes have to drink out of that small vial of why public service still is a noble calling, in the sense of no matter what level of public service individuals may engage in, that there is that opportunity at the end to contribute, the ability to engage people behind finding a solution, to arguably make life better around whatever the issue may be. And like I say, it's not around any particular policy or issue. It's everybody comes at it from that general perspective, whether they're conservative, moderate, liberal. And like I say, whatever the policy issue may be, people all come at it from that perspective of wanting arguably to try to solve a problem and to try to make something better in their perspective. And I think that at the end of the day is what we all still hope for.
What have you seen change in the public square in terms of this civic engagement, basically since you kind of entered it?
That question, from my election to the Nebraska legislature in 2008, when I was on the ballot, to when I left the legislature, kind of this essentially December 2016, to even now, in 2024, a 16-year period. I would say the advent of social media over that first 8-year period, and now the second kind of additional 8-year period since 2016, has truly changed both how people engage with their government and how they engage with public servants. It changes how government engages with the citizenry, and how they engage with constituents. But it also, I think to some extent, it has unfortunately coarsened the civility that typically I had grown up with, at least in terms of how the respect that you have for the public square, as I use that terminology, in terms of someone who is in public office or a public official, whether they're an appointed public official, a volunteer public official, or an elected public official. It just feels to some extent the ability for someone on a social media channel to literally write and say anything about any issue or anything they want with no ramifications whatsoever. It really has changed the mental attitudes of how individuals in public service look at their jobs, look at their day-to-day life, realizing that there is arguably maybe there's less respect for what they do. There is a coarsening of no matter what they do, there are more individuals who are going to chastise them and criticize them and arguably say outlandishly demeaning things to them, in comparison to people on social media who will say positive, reinforcing things to them. And I think, I mean, and I would say over the last 8 years, I've seen and noticed that on social media a lot more than my first 8 years really engaging on social media. And I can honestly say, like, as someone who is kind of grown up with social media as a public official, I opened up a Facebook account during my first political campaign in 2008. So I literally was at the advent of Facebook being used in political campaigns in 2008. And so it was kind of the first kind of real experience of using a social media account to engage with constituents and getting information out, and then started to use Twitter as a vehicle to do that as well. And for 8 years, that was an experience that was just a very different mechanism than it is now. And I think it's really, really difficult for people in public life to really be able to take a step back and really feel valued for the work they do, realizing that the general public is not reinforcing anything to the magnitude of positivity on social media channels in comparison to the negativity. And that alone, I think, can create a level of mental anguish that would make anybody not want to go into public service. Spend 15 minutes on a social media platform of your choice, particularly Facebook or X, as it's now called, those two platforms. And it would make anybody not want to go work in a public service position, whether you're in the Department of Education, a local street department for a city, a public safety department, I mean, like, you name it. I mean, it kind of makes you take a step back and go, wow, like, why would anyone want to go give their life to serve other people in this role when there is nothing but a level of negativity? And that's really concerning for someone who values the work other people are doing on behalf of us, as taxpayers, as people who are asking other people to give their careers to help arguably help make our civil society move forward.
Yeah. So that's a tough thing to grapple with. I mean, people, I think, had varying extremist opinions before, but there was a bit of a filter because there wasn't it wasn't normal to just come out and say it to everybody what you're thinking. And then social media made it normal to do that, which then changes the zeitgeist. It just raises the level of all those extremist positions, or just in people being upset about things. I know that even teachers, administrators, it's harder and harder to find people that are willing to move into those positions of leadership as well, public service, or just leadership in general, because there is a lot that they have to grapple with that maybe they didn't used to.
Yeah, like I say, it's more of just the ease in which the general population, general public can communicate with public servants, that in the past, picking up a phone, sending a letter, even email prior to 2008. I mean, I think we all think about it prior to 2008, email came out in, the late 90s. So like you think about how we communicated communication wise, we were still sending a lot, mostly letters. Email started really coming on the scene, in 2000, 2001, 2002. So it's just the technology has advanced so fast, so quick, and the ability for people to share feedback, share insights, share their opinions. I think we all just hope that everybody, once again, it's not about censorship. It's more about trying to ask individuals to put yourself in other people's shoes. It's one thing to share your feedback. It's one thing to share your opinions, but realize that, you may be at some point in time in a position similar to these individuals that you're giving feedback or commentary on. And that's always kind of my viewpoint I always share with people, which is, hey, you just always be mindful you could be in their position at some point in your life. And just before you go comment on Facebook or Twitter or any other social media channel, just be mindful of what you're going to post, because that could be you at some point in time. And you just want to be thinking about that before you post anything, and always be thinking about that.
Yeah. Yeah. We're all human on
All human.
wherever we're at on whatever spectrum of whatever issue. We're still human. Yeah. Okay. Really interesting. Setting the concern about that all aside now, just in terms of challenges and rewards of holding positions like these, are there still rewards?
Oh, of course. Oh, absolutely. I would
Let
say,
us with the rewards.
oh, I mean, whether it's, I mean, whether it's an appointed, look, the reward, whether in public service, even the position I'm in now as the present CEO of the Greater Omaha Chamber, or, an appointed public service position as a Nebraska Highway Commissioner. I mean, the rewards is the ability to impact your community, the ability to be at the table, as I say, to try to impact your community, your neighborhood, your city, your state in a positive way. And that's always, I think, the reward. And that's why you always want to encourage people to get involved. You always want to encourage people to look at the positive side, no matter how many negatives there are. I mean, I encourage everybody, I always say this, as difficult as it may be to run for public office, or how difficult it may be to serve as in a volunteer appointed position in public life, I always encourage everybody to do it still, because the ability to create a positive impact, no matter what level of government, no matter what level of volunteer service, the reward is your ability to make a positive impact is still significant. And yes, you are sacrificing time. You are sacrificing something else in your life at the end of the day to make that positive impact on a community, on a neighborhood, on children, on families, on businesses, on other organizations. But the reality is you're making an impact. And I think that at the end of the day, as that is an overarching driving force that I still believe, as a part of our human nature, people are pulled to that. People want, at the end of the day, to look back and feel that they've made a difference,
Mm.
whether in their career, whether in their family, whether in some aspect of their life. They want to feel that they've done something that has left a lasting impact, lasting difference. And public service is still the way to be able to do that. And in some aspect or another, service to your community, service to an institution or an organization where you have that ability to impact a greater good beyond just yourself, beyond just your organization. That is important. And I'm just fortunate in the role I'm in now, the Greater Omaha Chamber. We are the oldest in the largest business association in the state of Nebraska, representing not just Omaha, but near an 8-county service area where, I get to be involved in a lot of different initiatives and projects and efforts in a significant geographic area surrounding the greater Omaha area. And it's, as I say, it's not just about the organization. I get to be engaged in significant community initiatives that will have a long-lasting impact well beyond my time in this role, well beyond hopefully my life. And I think that is why it's important to sacrifice time, to sacrifice effort, sacrifice sometimes your mental anguish, sometimes for the greater good of thinking and realizing you're going to be able to make a positive impact for a community, for a neighborhood, for a project that's going to have a lasting positive impact.
Yeah. It sounds like we all kind of need to have one of those little vials of idealism next to our bed. But it sounds like also that it fills up a little bit more when we recognize and can see the impact that we've made, which takes some time.
Yeah.
It can be really deflating to hear something negative, but over time it can build something maybe even stronger inside of ourselves. Yeah. Okay, so you've been in this role with the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce for about a year. What is similar about this role to roles you've played in the past? Similarities, differences?
The similarity, perhaps the best similarity, I think, is the uniqueness that every single day, as I've shared with a number of people, every single day here at the Greater Omaha Chamber, it feels like there's something new that is happening, that is different, that maybe didn't happen yesterday or last week or last month. And so the regular newness of initiatives, newness of activities, newness of projects is similar to some work that happened at my prior role as a vice president of external relations at the University of Nebraska system, where I was in a role where, yes, I was the university's chief lobbyist, so I was heavily involved in government relations, and yes, I served as the university's kind of chief external relations officer as well. But there was always something that kind of percolated up every day or every week, something new that kind of came up. And so in this role, similar to that role, there was always something new that came up, but created a little bit of spice in your daily dish, so to speak, that you kind of have to, you get to work on, you get to deal with, or you get to ideate on, to think about or take action on. And that's something that's similar, that for me continues to create a level of energy, which is positive, that you do not get in a routine of kind of the status quo. For me, I feel is positive, because if you get in a routine of like, hey, I'm doing the same thing every single day, day in and day out, and things do not feel like they're changing, that is when your creative juices start to evaporate. That is when some of your leadership skills, some of your leadership talents can start to become dull. And then arguably you start to feel that you are not at your best. And I think in that sense, this role, there is that continual change day in, day out, week in and week out, that creates, hey, there's something new consistently that I am having to push myself to think differently, that's good for me to be able to continue to sharpen those skills day in and day out, week in and week out. Simultaneously, not having that consistency is also kind of for a first year. I mean, I would say for being in this role for a year, that is something that I haven't had to do that for a while. At I was at the University of Nebraska for 6 years prior to being in this role, and so I was able to at least ease into my role at the university. After that first year, I was able to build a little consistency, build a little continuity in the sense of being able to build enough around my day, my regular routine, and then have items percolate up where I was able to ride kind of my day, my regular understandings of new things that were coming up versus regular activities. At some point, I think that's kind of a unique opportunity that I hope at some point I will see in a unique role like this. In terms of there's so many things happening in the greater Omaha area, though, where so many organizations, so many institutions in the greater Omaha area look to the greater Omaha Chamber to be a partner, to help facilitate, to help be a catalyst for economic development work, for kind of community engagement work, to help be that lead partner or that supporting partner on initiatives that can really help drive the future of our city and our region. And so there's so many things that are happening right now. It's always trying to help identify kind of what really is priorities, what are not priorities, what really are in our lane, what are things that are outside of our lane, what should we lead on, what should we be maybe supporting or advocating instead of. And I think that's always that's a lot to be thinking about day in and day out right now. And after year one, as we're coming up to my first year in the role, I feel I have a much better grasp of that than when I started. But I also would say that is a work in progress. That there is consistently that work does not stop after year one. That there is going to always be kind of that understanding of what really are your priorities.
Continually reevaluate.
Reevaluate what are your priorities for year 2, year 3, year 4, and we are in the process right now of building out kind of our 3-year overarching strategy, really centered around where are we going to be at as an organization, our economic development focus and our talent workforce development focus. And so that will help us align really kind of what will be those priorities that will help us, as I say, prioritize what we really will focus on versus areas we'll kind of maybe more be supportive of and advocate for and not so much lead on. So that really is kind of where we're at now after coming up to kind of the finishing of year one. But as I've shared it feels like I've been in this role for 5 years. It just feels like it's been a lot of work, a lot of activity in nearly 12 months. We've been able to accomplish a tremendous amount of work as an organization. But as I've shared with everybody in our team and our board and our investors and supporters in the community, we have a lot of work to continue to do. I'm a big believer that we just got to keep sprinting as fast as we can until we collapse. We'll take a deep breath, get some water, take a quick break, and then we'll keep running again. And that's what we've got to do to try to get through this marathon. For the next so to speak, 12 more miles or 13 more miles left of the marathon, and then we can go from there.
So you hear from large, medium, small businesses. You talk to a lot of people. What challenges and opportunities are you seeing that they're facing here where we're at in 2024 at this point?
And you captured it first off, the Greater Omaha Chamber, first off, we represent, as the largest business association in the state with nearly 3,000 members. We represent, Fortune 250 companies like the Union Pacific Mutual of Omaha's, Kiewit corporations of the world, to nearly 80% of our members are small businesses, which people have a tendency to forget. So 80% of our members are those small business members under, under 100 employees or less. So I think we always like to remind folks that we've got such a diverse membership in the Greater Omaha Chamber. And so we hear from a litany of different members in terms of what they're experiencing, both in a positive, both in a negative, and to some extent what they see on the horizon. And we will be going out here shortly, in later August, early September, as we do kind of our annual membership survey to our members in preparation of what they kind of see on the horizon for 2025, in preparation for our economic outlook event, which we do every year. But in my engagements with members over the course of the summer, there is clearly a lot of focus right now in terms of what's happening a little bit on the national scale and in national economy in terms of what's occurring with interest rates. That has a significant impact in terms of lending and finance. But from a local perspective, it all comes down to our workforce, and it all comes down to our talent and our ability, whether you're a major employer, large employer, or you're a small business looking at your 10 employees or your 5 employees. It's the ability to be able to keep your existing employee base or looking to try to add to your employee base. And that truly is something we see in the Greater Omaha area. And it's unique, and depending on where you're at. I've got chamber members in the Omaha area, Omaha proper area, that are looking at a lack of talent in certain technology, IT spaces, versus some communities right now that are limited in our geographic service area. I say, representing areas such as Dodge County, Washington County, Cass County, Otoe County, that are limited in terms of being able to continue to expand with certain new companies wanting to move to their areas because of limitations on housing and childcare. And so to some extent, we've got a variety of different limitations for growth in certain areas of our region based on quality of place issues like childcare and housing, but also direct items impacting members purely based on our ability to recruit talent and retain talent. So those are issues that we see, that I'm hearing from members day in, day out. There is always that item that we are thinking about, is how do we consistently think about the Greater Omaha area in terms of a business and talent attraction focus. How do we tell the story about our region? How do we tell the story about our members? And how do we tell our story about the need to attract more talent to our region? And that is something that we will likely be focusing significantly on over the next few years, is trying to tell that story about the Greater Omaha area to prospective companies and to prospective residents and employees, of why they should be thinking about moving from the coasts to the Greater Omaha area. Forbes magazine a few months ago named Omaha the #1 city in America to move to in 2024. A major feather in the cap to the Omaha area, being able to highlight why this is a city that is truly a city that is safe, that a city that provides tremendous economic opportunities, housing opportunities, transportation, that you can get around in the city anywhere about in 25 minutes. It's something that we generally are getting out and promoting through a marketing campaign, through starting here shortly in the coming month, that will kind of go throughout the rest of this year. It's just opportunities like that we know we have to do more of as a region to be able to tell that story. But Andrea, it's something that every kind of company has their own issues, but the talent and workforce issue is really unique. But I'd also share, the overall economic factors in the Omaha area have been relatively strong. I mean, we have seen a number of positive things happening in the Omaha area, but at the same time, we also know there's areas we need to continue to focus on. Our ability to continue to focus on entrepreneurship and focusing on our ability to grow small businesses, entrepreneurs, and startups is a significant factor. Our ability at the end of the day to drive more access to capital for those entrepreneurs, it remains a significant issue. And I hear that from our startup community and our entrepreneurs on a regular basis. So there is some positive things always happening in the Omaha area, but simultaneously, I hear from some of our members, hey, while there's good things happening, we have to consistently be thinking about how do we strengthen some of the other areas that we need to be thinking about. So there's always, while always I'm celebrating the positive things, I'm always also trying to find what can we be doing better to serve not just our members, but our greater business community. And that's one thing that more and more is how do you focus on that small business, entrepreneur, startup community, which we know at the end of the day, there is a tremendous upside the more we can provide greater access to capital, greater support for the future of those small businesses. Particularly, I know a lot of our various tech startups, Omaha's got a tremendous upside with a number of different sectors, with some of our industry growth that's happening in some selective industries that we see tremendous opportunities.
So are there key indicators that you kind of look for to measure the health and how things are going in Omaha?
That's funny you say that. When I came in this role, that was something that, talking with my board members and talking with our investors, that was something that I had asked in terms of like, what do we want to look at in terms of really using as kind of what I would say key benchmarks to determine where we sit at as a community, and something we can measure on a regular basis to determine our success and our failure. And we then in December 2023, as we were finalizing, I would say, our kind of our program of work for the year, we settled on three main benchmark indicators that we use on a monthly basis to determine kind of our success and failure of where we're going at as a region.
Yeah.
So we use the benchmark of primary job growth, wage growth, and labor force growth for our Omaha MSA, for each of those three indicators. And we use that, we measure ourselves as the Omaha MSA against the US average, as well as we look and select a few peer cities in the United States and compare ourselves against to determine how well we're doing. And if we are competing against these peer cities as well as the US average, kind of show how are we faring in terms of those three major economic indicators in terms of our economic health, our kind of development growth, our workforce growth, to be able to have some broader, bigger indicators. Now, granted, the Greater Omaha Chamber, our work we do, month in and month out, while we focus on a variety of different economic development related initiatives, outputs, as I call them, relate to some outcomes. We have some ability to impact those specific indicators, but we don't take direct ownership for all three of those. I mean, we have the ability to influence them, but we don't say, hey, we completely own the ability to drive wage growth in the Omaha MSA. But we do have the ability to influence all three of those areas. And so that was something that we felt, hey, being able to influence them, hey, that's something we can do. We will take those three indicators, but we also have some sub indicators as well. We look at our ability in terms of the number of jobs that we can arguably create through projects that we either help land, new projects that come to the region, or projects and companies that we help expand in the region, capital investment that we're able to help bring to the region, or capital investment that we help it get expanded in the region based on companies that we help them expand. wages, that same kind of issue, wages that are created based on new projects that are brought to our region or projects that are expanded in our region. So certain other economic development related criteria or economic development related benchmarking benchmarks that we use as well as indicators for the work that we do. But those are, I say, kind of secondary benchmarks we use outside of those big main three items. And I would say they've been very helpful to kind of gauge how well we're doing as an Omaha MSA. Some of those indicators, we see that we've been doing better as a region. Some of them not as well. We have seen that we have fallen behind in comparison both to the U.S. average and our peer cities, and it's been a wake-up call to both our internal management team and our board leadership that we have to be thinking about strategically. Are we doing what we need to do to be able to influence some of these major indicators? And I think that has been a healthy conversation as an organization and a healthy conversation with our stakeholders in terms of what we are doing as a region to drive what we want to see as a region, both in terms of our economic development as well as our future growth development in terms of being able to use these indicators to help make those data-driven decisions, I would say, moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. So Heath, at the beginning of the conversation, you said that one of the things that really brought you into public service was that you have this desire and natural ability to bring people together, to build consensus, facilitate difficult conversations. And I'm wondering, as we're closing this out, I've got a couple more questions for you, but this is this key question here. What kind of skills or advice do you have for people who want to be able to do those things too? Like, what are the things that you you think? There's some key things that you do that help bring people together, build consensus, and deal with those difficult conflictual interests.
Some of this may sound, Andrea, some of this may sound very, very elementary. But, I would say in my lived experience, I have come to find out part of that ability to really be a aggressive, active listener with the interested parties that you're trying to either help facilitate and or trying to help build consensus with is really part of that hard work. When I was placed in a position, as a state senator, having to negotiate between two opposing sides around a public policy issue, it was me having to actively listen and catch every ounce and every aspect of body language, of every word that came out of their mouth, every single potential communication that came from the engagement, to see how we could possibly find a way to get them to think or to move slightly from where they were at on their position based on sharing an alternative perspective or an alternative consideration. And by doing that enough, you then start to move opposing sides slightly closer to each other. And I think we always find ourselves wanting to talk while we're listening to individuals. And that's always a challenge, is when you are really trying to be a facilitator. And if that's really what you're trying to do, is to build consensus, it is, when I use the word aggressive, active listener, you're really investigating every single aspect of communication that they're putting out. Physical communication, verbal communication, everything that they're doing, so that you can start to piece together, how can I interpret what can be done to move them from point A to point B, put something out to move them from point B to point C, put something out to move them from point C to point D. And that may sound elementary, but I've seen it work where I've seen people try to do this and they're not very good at it. That they will simply keep talking and keep talking, and it puts people off, or they're like, hey, this person just isn't listening. They're not getting it. They're not getting what I'm putting out. They're not getting what I'm saying. People get up from the table, they leave frustrated. And it's more of like, you have to almost acknowledge, hey, I understand what you're saying. And I'm going to just listen. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take down what you're saying. Okay, I'm going to go share what you're saying to this person, and we're going to go. And like I say, it's a very delicate dance when you are trying to help be a negotiator, and you're trying to say, how do we find a way to get to yes, realizing that you are probably not going to get everything you want, and I'm probably not going to get everything I want, and they're not going to get everything they want. And that's always realizing that if you are the person in the middle, that you have to be the one that probably does less of the talking. Or if you're going to do the talking, you do the talking at the very end, that you are kind of there at the middle, literally being the aggressive, active listener to be able to piece everything together. And you take a step back and then you put all the pieces together. And I think that for me is where I've been able over the course of my career to be able to do some of this work. It's to be able to take a step back, to be able to investigate that communication, as I can say, to kind of be more strategic in terms of identifying where that may be, where we can piece together potential compromise, where we can piece together potential consensus. And it's purely based on your ability to kind of weave together where there may be solutions that there weren't there before. And like I say, it's just more of, most people want to put their own ideas out, and that's always the challenge. And most people say, hey, I've got an idea, let's go do this. And it's more of like to kind of to keep yourself, to put yourself in the position, which is keep your idea to yourself as long as possible, to hold your ideas back, to let everything else be out there, and to kind of put everything out there as long as humanly possible, to investigate everything else. And then if you feel that you then put your ideas out after you're able to keep everything else on the field, so to speak, and then piece together everything together, and then you can weave together everything. And candidly, that's just kind of how I've been able to do that in my own lived experience. And I can say it's worked out more times than not. It has not always worked out every time. I always share. It's not like it's a perfect formula, but for the most part, it's worked out more times than not, because you're able to see the whole field, and you're able to see all the ideas, like I say, all of the pieces of communication, everything that's been shared. And you're literally able to put the pieces of the puzzle together a little bit better, and you're able to kind of weave together ideas in a way that arguably you feel, hey, this is a good enough solution that people can all get behind.
Yeah, that sounds like great advice for somebody who wants to be a voice of influence. I'm so glad that we could have this conversation. I really appreciate your sharing your experience, and also in particular that last part. I think that is this idea of being able to build consensus and bring just different parties together is just incredibly important as we're moving forward, in whether it's business or the public square, whichever one in our families. So thank you so much for being a voice of influence in Omaha and Nebraska, and for this episode today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It was great to be with you today.